Okay, good morning, everybody. Um Today is the first of our sessions, a series of sessions on the Gita. Lakshmi Narayan ji, as you know, had taken a session 2, 3 weeks back, and then we had a discussion with him that he could cover the 18 chapters of the Gita over the next uh, 10, 12 kind of sessions, depending on convenience. And the session last time was very fruitful. There were a lot of conversations that happened after the session was over, and I'm hoping that we would have the same kind of engagement on these sessions as well. So we will be trying to do this every Sunday, same time, 11 o'clock to 12 o'clock. People are free to have your family members join the sessions. 11. Lakshmi Narayan ji will take the session from 11 to 11:45 or so, and then we'll open the last 5-10 minutes for question and answers that you might have. Right? All your screens and phones are on. Your voice is on mute, and will be opened at the end during the Q&A session to avoid disturbance while the speaker is speaking. So good morning, and I'll just hand it over to Lakshmi Narayan ji.
Thanks, Ravi. Good morning to all of you. So it's a new experience to all of you, I guess, studying Gita on a Sunday and through work. So what is this Bhagavad Gita all about? In fact, before the session started, Ravi was casually asking me, is Bhagavad Gita the same as Vedanta? What is the difference and all that stuff? See, Vedanta is a combination of two Sanskrit terms, Veda and Anta. Veda means knowledge, Anta means end. Veda basically is the knowledge of life and living. Now, when we say it is the knowledge of life and living, what is it? What is the purpose of human life? We are all born as human beings in this world. Then what is the purpose of this life? We are born, we have to survive, we have to grow, achieve this, that, and then one fine day we die. So then what's the purpose of all this? This keeps bothering a human being because a human being is more conscious than animals and plants. So this purpose of life is discussed in the Vedas. The Vedas talk about 4 purposes or 4 goals. In Sanskrit terms, they are called as Artha, Kama, Dharma, Moksha. Artha means wealth, survival. Kama means pleasure. Dharma in the context here means future. I'll explain that later. As of now, you understand it as future security. Then moksha. Moksha, liberation. The same thing in Tamil literatures, they call the same thing with different words. They call it as Porul, Imbam, Aram, Veedu. Porul means Artha, wealth. Kama means entertainment, pleasure, which they call as Imbam. And Dharma is called as Aram. In this context, I'm saying it is reserving the future security. Then Moksha, liberation, freedom. Now, what Vedanta is saying is these are the 4 goals. This is something what Maslow's theory also says. First, everybody is just concerned and worried about survival. Food, shelter, clothing, these are the things that we are concerned about. So the initial goal, the purpose of life of human beings is survival, like any other animals. And then once the survival is taken care of, then the mind goes to pleasure. Like for example, even when you eat your food, lunch or dinner, first you have food to fill your stomach, to quench the hunger. Then comes all the ice creams and sweets and everything, which is for more taste. So first, survival is the goal. Once that is relatively taken care of, then we think in terms of pleasure. Now, the mind, a human being is called as Manushya. Manushya means one who thinks and functions, one who has a mind. So the mind goes to the past and future. In the case of animals situation, the mind doesn't go to past and future. When a zebra is chased by a lion or a tiger in the jungle, once it escapes from the tiger or lion, it will be aram se sitting and having its meal. But when somebody chases you with a gun and you escape and reach your house, you cannot get back to your normal living without fear bothering you, without thinking about future, whether he will come again and attack you, etc. You will have such thoughts because a human being has more developed mind and animals don't have that. So that way it's a blessing also, it's a curse also. So the future is something that is there in human being situation. So once our security and pleasure is taken care of in the present, then we say, I want to take care of my future also. So just in case if there is, birth after death. Now, there are people in this world who are born with proper physical body. Some of them are born with physically challenged body, etc., etc. There are some people are born in opulence, some people are born in poverty. So what is all this? So the mind tells, listen, maybe it is due to the past action. So your action seems to give you two types of results. One is seen result, other is unseen result. So the unseen results contribute for this. So some of them, for example, they have the money, but they cannot use it. They cannot enjoy it. So what is it due to? So how I can do something in such a way that I'll not only get money, but I'll also be able to enjoy. So if there are certain actions like that, if I can do certain, charity and tapas, effort, control and all that, maybe my future will also be reserved. So I start functioning like that. So that is dharma. And then in all these three, when you analyze, there are certain imperfections in all this. Whatever we may achieve in this world, the worldly objects and beings, it is impermanent. It is not permanent. Firstly, there is so much. The moment I have a desire to achieve something, there is tension, whether I'll get it or not. And after putting in so much effort, if I get it, I'm not sure whether I'll retain it. To come to a certain status, we need to struggle a lot. But that is nothing. To retain the status is the worst thing. The status quo is not easy. That's even more difficult. So there is a lot of difficulty with which you do this and that, and then still it is impermanent. It goes away. Like reputation, for example. Shakespeare says, reputation is an idol, most false imposition, oft got without merit and lost without deserving it. It's an idol, and very often you get it not because you have done something great. Everybody talked about you, you became famous, and suddenly no fault of yours, your reputation will go. All sorts of slandering, everything will happen and your reputation will go. It's a flimsy thing. So everything is impermanent. And not only that, after so much effort, when you achieve something, there is still the feeling that lot more to be achieved, lot more to be achieved. I still want more, I still want more. That is another imperfection. I never feel that I have attained what I need to attain. That absolute contentment is not there. Then to achieve something in life, I need to lose something. That is the reality of life. If I have to buy a car, I need to lose or reduce, my bank balance will reduce. And what is my bank balance? My bank balance is nothing but conversion of my physical and mental energies. I am going to this company called Renew Power. I am giving my physical and mental energy, and I am getting my salary, and that is what is getting saved as my bank balance. So my physical energy, my mental energy is getting converted into a physical car. So there is some loss when there is some gain. then all this, what happens is, only gives you pleasure in the beginning. The next contact, third time, fourth time, there is no pleasure. When you look forward for mango season, when the mango season arrives, the first mango that you have, it gives you X amount of pleasure. Second mango, it reduces. Third mango, it reduces further. Nth mango, there is no pleasure. But when you are denied, there is displeasure. It's called neutralization. So the law of diminishing returns starts kicking in. So that's binding. So these are the 4 imperfections minimum every achievement in the world has, which is impermanent, craving for more, loss inherent, and then binding. So Shastras say these are the 3 goals which majority of the people go for, but they remain dissatisfied, they remain bound, they don't know what to do, they are not happy with it, they don't know any other method because without it they feel miserable. What to do? So then when the question comes, I want happiness, because everybody is looking for only happiness. That's the one thing, happiness or freedom, that's the one thing that we are all looking for. And we try to get it in 2 ways. One is direct, other is indirect. Whatever I feel will give me joy or happiness, I contact it. It's called Sukha Prapti. Whatever I believe will give me sorrow, I avoid it. That's called Dukkha Nivritti. So that is an indirect method of getting happiness. If you think listening to this class, Bhagavad Gita lecture will give me happiness, then you will sign in. You say, this fellow comes every Sunday and starts boring us. It gives me sorrow. You will switch off. You will not sign in. So, Sukha Prapti and Dukkha Nivritti. Courting joy, avoiding sorrow, which is direct and indirect way of courting happiness only. So what we really want is happiness. But what kind of happiness we want? Permanent, having attained, there should nothing more remains to be attained, and there should be no loss, and I should not get bound. Nobody likes to be told what to do, what not to do. Even a child doesn't like to be told, do this, don't do this. Everybody likes to be free. You've got to let me free. So, that freedom, we don't want bondage. After getting something, if it goes away, I become miserable. So that is bondage. I don't want that. So is there some goal like that? And that Shastra says, that is your real self. That is your true nature. And the fact that your true nature is happiness, you will not rest content till you reach that infinite happiness. So some of the examples Shastras give for that. And that is, if a coil spring is 4 feet height, and you compress that coil spring from 4 feet to 1 foot, there is pressure. You release it to 2 feet, there is still pressure but less. You release it to 3, pressure is reduced quite a bit but still there. When you release it to 4 feet, there is no pressure. Why? Because it's reached its original state. So there is constant pressure in every human being to achieve that infinite happiness. Till you find that infinite happiness, permanent happiness, you will not rest content. So using this logic, what Vedanta tells you is, your original state is infinite happiness. Till you reach that, you will not rest content. There will be constant pressure. And you are today not knowing that your original nature is infinite happiness. You are imagining yourself to be this limited individual with this body, mind, and intellect. And this ignorance is causing the desire, and due to the desire, you are running around and getting caught. So this knowledge and all this is given in the later part of Vedas, which comes in the last portion of the Vedas, which is called Antbhaga Vedas, which is called Vedanta. So Vedanta talks about this goal, which is infinite happiness. But the first 3 portions of Vedas, called Mantra, Brahmana, Aranyaka, they talk about various rituals, devatas, etc. In the modern context, oblating your action for various goals. In this Veda Purva Bhag, the beginning portion of the Vedas, the three goals, that is Artha, Kama, Dharma. They cater to that only. And they also slowly make you understand that they are all relative goals. They are only going to provide you up to a point, but you will not rest content till you reach that infinite happiness. And once a person goes through this life, in the Brahmacharya Ashrama, which is student lifestyle, you learn all this. Then in Grahastha Ashrama, married life, you practice these things, you achieve little bit of money, fame, name, power, position, family, status, all this. Then you slowly realize that it has these doshas or these imperfections. Then there will come a time in your life, if we take these two as first two quadrants of life, and we split life into 4 quadrants, and the first quadrant is student life, second quadrant is married life or Grahastha Ashrama. In these two, these experiences would have got, and hopefully some of us would have asked this question, Arey, what am I doing? Initially I thought with the bicycle I'll be happy because I've been only walking. And once I got the bicycle, then I said, yeah, so much struggle. It will be better if there is a motor fit into this. So if I get a motorcycle, it will be happy. Then I got the motorcycle, then there is pollution and this and that. So if I had a car, it will be better. But car without AC, it's even worse. So I need a car with AC. Then I have the car with AC and everything, but then I don't have somebody sitting next to me. So if I have a partner in life, it will be nice. So etc. etc. So there is constantly craving for more and more. Then to get that kind of a lifestyle, to retain that kind of a lifestyle, there is constant struggle and loss of energy, physical, mental, etc. And then there is bondage. With the car, it's not that I'm feeling great, but without the car, I feel very unhappy. So I'm bound. So if I start beginning to understand this, then the question comes in few of us, like, come on, yaar, is this the goal of life? Am I just born to do this from morning till night? Isn't there something better to do? If there is something else, then you move from Vedas to Vedanta. So that Vedanta talks about that infinite happiness, how to get that, what is the knowledge associated with that, and all that is the end portion of the Vedas, which is called Upanishad. Now, once you achieve that, there is nothing more remains to be achieved. Once you realize your true nature to be infinitely happy, thereafter, you have nothing more to be attained. Now, one question may come. Once I reach that state where I have achieved a position, a status where there is nothing more to be attained, then will I not become lazy? Why will I act in the world? In fact, Vedanta says thereafter only you become more dynamic, because there's a fundamental difference between a person who is acting to find happiness and a person who is acting out of happiness. See, when India wins in cricket, or any sport for that matter, especially we are crazy about cricket, so I'm taking that example. So when India wins, you spend your money, buy laddus and distribute to everyone. You are so happy. So when you are full with happiness, the energy flows out of you uncontrollably. So the energy comes out in the form of giving to the society. You will be acting dynamically with no selfishness, nothing stopping you. So in fact, when a person finds the true happiness within, he or she becomes more dynamic. That's the truth of life. In fact, when you are trying to find happiness through an action, the action starts giving you stress and strain and all that. And these things we will discuss as we proceed further in some of the other chapters. But I'm just giving this introduction today. So this is Veda, this is Vedanta. The Antubhag of Vedas is Vedanta, which deals with the absolute goal of happiness or freedom, which is in Sanskrit called as moksha, in Tamil called as Veedu. Veedu means home. What is that home? Very interesting. You leave your home, you go work, you roam around, you do everything, go to watch movie, play golf, whatever you do, and then finally you come back home. Similarly, finally you come back to your own true self. Hence that goal is called as Veedu in Tamil. In English, in Sanskrit it's called moksha. In English you can call it liberation, freedom. So that's the ultimate goal, but that is for a matured person. Initial only these 3 goals. Now this is how the Vedas have been given. Now when you come to Bhagavad Gita, in Bhagavad Gita, the student is Arjuna, the man of action. like you and me, who is very much in the world. So the same knowledge of Vedas and Vedanta is diluted and given with lot more explanation to a man of action, that is Bhagavad Gita. So Bhagavad Gita is nothing but practical Vedanta. So Bhagavad Gita will also teach you how to find the first three goals: the security, pleasure, how to be successful, how to enjoy, how to be peaceful. Because in the world, what is the problem? One set of people are extremely dynamic, not peaceful. Another set of people are very peaceful, but not dynamic. For example, you go to the villages. There is relatively less activities, a peaceful but contented lot. You come to the cities, Mumbai, Delhi, New York, London, you go to these cities, you find dynamic action. But people, by their own admission, they are saying we have lost our peace. And we look forward for weekends and vacations. We want to go to this place and that place to relax. So there's a lot of stress associated with work. So how to be successful, how to be enjoying what we have acquired, how to enjoy the success, and how to retain peace. And all this is discussed. Also, it talks about how these are all having these imperfections and how you need to move from this and grow and go to the highest goal later on, which is the last two quadrants of life, which is Vanaprastha, which is preparation for sannyas. And sannyas is the last quadrant where you sit down with simple living, focusing more on realizing the truth, happiness, etc. And this is how the whole thing is. So Bhagavad Gita talks about all the four goals: success, happiness, securing your future, and it also talks about the limitations there, and it gives you that maturity if followed correctly, and it takes you to the highest liberation, etc. This is Bhagavad Gita. So strictly speaking, there is no difference between Bhagavad Gita and Vedanta. Vedanta is for more matured people who are seeking that liberation. Bhagavad Gita is more for people like you and me. That's about it. So Bhagavad Gita is not to be seen as a scripture which is a religious scripture, only people of certain religion should study, or anybody else who's studying also should convert to that particular religion. Nothing like that. It talks about knowledge of life and living. There is no need to convert, nothing. Just start following. You are to concentrate more on following the philosophy and get the benefit. In fact, in the book Vedanta Treatise written by my guru, Swamiji, the thing that made me get inspired and join the ashram for 3 years and study this was that one line that he wrote in the book, which says, the role of Vedanta is to pull man out of his infatuation to personalities and celebrities and focus on eternities. Pull man out of his infatuations to personalities and educate him on eternities. It's about eternal values. It's about eternal principles, which is helpful to me in my living, not become attached to personalities. Now, this lecture is given by the personality named Lakshmi Narayan. End of the day, you should forget about Lakshmi Narayan and focus on the message given by Lakshmi Narayan. But unfortunately, in the world today, what happens is we get attached. Well, you may appreciate the way somebody presents it, and you may associate with that person a little more than the other. That's okay. Somebody gets inspired by a certain teacher. Somebody gets inspired by another teacher. Each one resonates with somebody else. That's okay. And you can be grateful also. But you should never allow your gratitude to come in your way. It is important that you have gratitude, but you should never allow your gratitude to come in between your growth and your life. That's very, very important. So, therefore, message is delivered, kill the messenger, says Swami Ramtita. not literally. Kill means don't get attached to the personalities. See the principles. So Bhagavad Gita talks about this only. Nothing else. Now, this Bhagavad Gita is given in 18 chapters of chaste philosophy. And it is a conversation between Sri Krishna and Arjuna. Arjuna is the student, Sri Krishna is the guru. And the background of the Bhagavad Gita is Mahabharata war. You all know that. And the Mahabharata war is between the Pandavas and the Kauravas. They were cousins. And Kauravas were on the unrighteous side and Pandavas on the righteous side. Kauravas had 11 battalions, Pandavas had 7 battalions. When their kingdom, the Pandavas' kingdom, was unrighteously taken over by Duryodhana, the Kauravas, the Pandavas followed the fundamental dharma, which is Sam, Dhan, Bhed, which is discussion, negotiation, then even giving in a little bit. First they negotiated, Duryodhana will not agree. Then they said, Chalo yaar, we'll give in. You just give us 5 villages. Duryodhana said, nothing doing. Not even that much land which a needle tip will occupy, I will part with. So Sama, Dhana didn't work. Then Bheda in politics. You try to weaken the opposition by splitting them to avert war, conflict. So they tried that also by trying to get Karna on their side by telling him the truth of his birth. But Karna said, nothing doing, I'm not coming. So Sama failed, Dhana failed, Bheda failed. Then there was no other option but to fight, which is Dhand. Dhand is war. So that is why the war situation arose between Pandavas and Kauravas. I'm saying this because a lot of people are misunderstanding this also. Some people even argue that, listen, Arjuna didn't want to fight because that's what happens in the first chapter. I'll talk about it. But Krishna made him fight and kill so many people. So Krishna is a bad guy. And why you have to study Krishna's philosophy? It is wrong. In fact, Krishna himself goes as an emissary to, bring peace between the two parties. But Duryodhana tried to arrest him. He didn't even agree. So that's the kind of a person. Duryodhana is extremely obstinate. So there was no other choice but to fight. So Shakespeare says, beware of entrance to a quarrel. Being in, let the enemy beware of thee. Beware of entrance to a quarrel. Being in, let the enemy beware of thee. Enemy here means adharma. Friend is dharma. Whenever I follow dharma, I'll be happy. Whenever I follow adharma, I'll be agitated, sad, disturbed. I lose my peace. And that will in turn affect my productivity. So the whole Gita is talking about adhering to dharma. The first word of the Gita starts with dharma. Bhagavad Gita starts with the word dharma, and it is a verse which is spoken by Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra is the father of Duryodhana. He is sitting in the Hastinapur palace. He can't see. So the power to see what is happening on the battlefield is given to Sanjaya, his charioteer, who can see what is happening on the battlefield in Kurukshetra. So Dhritarashtra is asking Sanjaya, Dharma kshetre Kurukshetre samaveta yuyutsavaha mamaka pandavaschaiva kima kurvata Sanjaya. Oh Sanjaya, what is happening on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, what is called as Dharma kshetra, between my children Kauravas and Pandu's children Pandavas. Pandu is Dhritarashtra's own brother. So, between my children and Pandu's children, what is happening on the battlefield, assembled on either side of the battlefield, I would like to know. Please tell me. This is how the Gita starts. So the first word the Gita starts with is what? Dharma. See, from this we learn a lot. Whenever we are starting something, it has to be positive. So the first thing that the Gita starts is dharma. How you communicate the message, it's very, very important. In Ramayana, Hanumanji is sent to Lanka because he could fly as he is the son of wind god. He's sent to Lanka to assure Mother Sita that Lord Rama is coming with the force to Ravana and take her back. So when Hanumanji goes, meets her, gives her the assurance, and he comes back, he has to say, I have met Sita, don't worry. She's fine, to Rama, because Rama is worried what has happened to her. So first you have to instill, because the person is so, waiting, so much waiting to know what is happening. So he first comes, and in Tamil he says, Kandeen Sidayai. Kandeen means first thing he says, I saw. He doesn't say Sita. Supposing he says, Sidayai Kandeen. You could say that in Tamil also. Sidayai Kandeen. Sidayai Kandeen means, in English, if you translate, it's like I saw Sita only, but then happened to Sita. So, Kandeen Sidayai. So always in communication, in work, in everything, when you have a meeting or anything, first thing you got to start with positive. And similarly, Bhagavad Gita starts with the positive terminology, dharma. And dharma kshetre, kuru kshetre. Kshetra means field. Our life, our personality, our field, it should be peaceful, has today become a field of disturbance, Kurukshetra, where the war is done. We have lost the peace and we have fallen into war. Why? What is the question Dhritarashtra is asking? Dhritarashtra is asking, what is happening between
Sir, your voice has got stuck. Can't hear you.
So, can you hear me now?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Yeah. So, Pandu lost his life, and the kingdom which should have come to Pandu's eldest son, Yudhishthira, was temporarily handed over to Dhritarashtra. Though he is blind, till attains that age where the kingdom can be handed over. But then Duryodhana also wanted, because he's the eldest son of Dhritarashtra, the confusion happened and all that. I'm not getting into all that. So that's how they ended up in this war. So when Dhritarashtra became the king, Dhritarashtra being to Pandu, and Pandu died, his children, Pandu's children, are also like his children now. But no, that is not the mentality of Dhritarashtra. He said, my children and Pandu's children. This is what you call as attachment. Mine versus yours. We come to the organization called Renew Power, and we are all working here. It should not be my department versus your department. My achievement versus your achievement. It is our. We have to rise from me to we. But the more and more my comes, me comes, I comes, what happens? We lose the peace and we fall into mental disturbances, worrying situations, stress and strain. So that's what it is saying. Dharma Kshetra has become Kurukshetra because of this attachment in us. Like Dhritarashtra had attachment to his children. And also this Dharma Kshetra, Kurukshetra, you can play with the words a little bit more. Kshetra, Kshetra, Dharma Kuru. You can say that. What does that mean? In every field, you do Dharma. So as long as you stick to your Dharma, is it? And talking Dharma. So the Dharma of a few people in charge of stock, it is their Dharma in this, as far as this particular event is concerned. And so each one of us has certain Dharma, as a father, as a mother, as a husband, as a wife, as a children, as teachers, as leaders. We have, each one of us have our Dharma, our duty, our role. Simply play that role with no prefix or suffix. That is what the Bhagavad Gita is giving in the very first beginning. And when you don't do that, you start thinking, what is in it for me? When I'm talking now, am I being appreciated? Oh, what is going to happen? And all these thoughts, what is the benefit, etc., etc. And the thoughts I comes, I lose the peace. And that will have a vicious cycle. That disturbance will affect my thinking will affect my productivity, my success. I get into a vicious cycle. So therefore, Kshetra Kshetra Dharma Kuru. This is how the Gita starts. And how Gita ends, the last verse of the Gita, in the 18th chapter, it ends with the word Mama. Yatra Yogeshwara Krishna, Yatra Partho Dhanurdaraha, Tatra Shri Vijayor Bhuti Dhruvo Nitir Matir Mama. Where there is Shri Krishna, where there is Arjuna, there is glory, there is victory, there is success. This is my opinion. That's the translation that Sanjaya says in the end, the 18th chapter, last verse. It is the 701st verse. Total in Bhagavad Gita, there are 701 verses. So, in life, we need to constantly stick to Dharma, but the mind tends to go to my individual personal gains. So, this is the challenge. So, we fall into that. And when we fall into that, it's a problem. So, what is my Dharma? Mama means my, Dharma means nature. What is my Dharma? What is my essential nature? So, absolute sense Vedanta says, your essential nature is happiness and freedom. You don't have to seek it outside, it is within you. This is exactly what is said by many Western philosophers also. Like Arthur Schopenhauer says, it is difficult to find happiness within, but it is impossible to find it elsewhere. What Arthur Schopenhauer also says. So therefore, you got to find it within. So my Dharma is my own self, which is my happiness, which is my real nature. That is one meaning. Other is, what is my nature? What is my role? What is my Dharma? How should I do it? That's all Bhagavad Gita talks about. So between this word Dharma and between this word Mama, the entire Bhagavad Gita philosophy is sandwiched. Mama Dharma. And also the word Gita, you repeat. If you repeat the word Gita, 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 what comes? Tyagi, 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 Tyagi comes. So the prime message of Bhagavad Gita is Tyag. Now this is where the problem is. Oh my God, now this fellow is coming to the point. He's telling us Tyag, which means maybe he's going to give us aparob. He's going to make us run away. No, Tyag means what needs to be given up is not your action. What needs to be given up is your selfishness, your attachment, your ego. That is what the Gita talks about. So Bhagavad Gita, 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 Gita. So you need to learn about this and rise above your selfishness, your attachment and ego. And when you rise above that, automatically there will be success, there will be enjoyment, there will be peace. How to do this is what the Gita talks about. Then, slowly what happens, Duryodhana introduces in the first chapter, I'm talking about first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, which is called as Arjuna Vishada Yoga, the yoga of Arjuna's state of despondency, the yoga of Arjuna's despondency. Arjuna falls into mental depression and stress in the first chapter. That's the chapter's title. So Dhritarashtra says this, and Sanjaya starts talking what is happening on the battlefield, and he says Duryodhana went to Drona and introduces both the armies, etc., etc. And Duryodhana is trying to talk confidently, though there is a lot of fear. And what is happening is, there are 11 battalions, Kauravas, and Pandavas have only 7 battalions. But yet Duryodhana is scared, though he is talking confidently. He uses the word paryaptam and aparyaptam in the 11th verse of chapter 1. He says, our army which is protected by Bhishma, Bhishma is the commander-in-chief of their army. So he says, our army is protected by Bhishma and their army protected by Bhima. Is in our army which is protected by Bhishma is unlimited, he says. Paryaptam. Paryaptam, one of the meaning is unlimited. And their army protected by Bhima is aparyaptam, means this is how he speaks. But there is an interesting twist here. What is that? When you use the word paryaptam and aparyaptam in Sanskrit, paryaptam means unlimited, also it means, paryaptam means limited, but also it means enough. Aparyaptam means not enough and unlimited. So he says, our army and their army, when he is talking like this, he says, our army is unlimited, but it is not enough. Their army is enough, but limited. What is he trying to say? He is showing his fear from within. He is saying, even though we have more in quantity, there is no unselfishness and selflessness in us. There is no cause for which we are fighting. What is the difference between crowd and team? Crowd is when you assemble a number of people in a particular place, it's crowd. When you bring in number of people together for a purpose, for a cause, it is team. So in the case of Pandavas, they are a team. In the case of Kauravas, there is no cause. It is selfishness. So they are not a team. So they are more powerful. That is one thing we learn. And then seeing this, the Bhishma, the commander-in-chief of Kaurava army, he says, let us cheer up the whole group, and he blows the conch and starts the war. Now again, the war is not started by Pandavas. The war was started by the Kauravas. And the war was accepted by the Pandavas and they fought the battle. And when the bugles were blown, the war was about to begin. Arjuna comes and says to his charioteer Sri Krishna, he says, take me and place me in a vantage position. I would like to see who all have come to fight. He wants to do SWOT analysis. Strength, weakness, opportunity, threat of both the sides he wants to analyze. So he says, take my chariot and place it in between both the armies. He says, my chariot. And Sri Krishna laughs. What do you mean by your chariot? When did this become yours? Ultimately, even the breath in our body is temporary. Nothing is permanent. We are all trustees. It's not mine, that possessiveness. So Sri Krishna takes the chariot and places right in front of Bhishma and Drona and says, follow them. In other words, Bhishma and Drona, personal angle, they are not in favor of this war. But due to their duty's sake, they sided on the Kaurava side. So you got to follow, means you be objective. You rise above your personal views and do what your duty calls for in the context. Forget about the outcome. What is the right thing for your thing? You follow that. So these are all the points we learn in the first chapter. But the problem is when Arjuna sees Bhishma Drona, Drona is his own guru. Bhishma is his great grandfather who renounced the throne for which they are fighting. He becomes emotional. He gets attached to them. How can I kill my own guru, my great grandfather, my friends and relatives on both sides? He becomes emotional. He allows his emotions to overpower and he gets into this stressful situation. That's how he falls into stress. So here we learn that as human beings, we should have emotions, but we should never become emotional. Plants have no emotions. Animals have emotions, but they become emotional. A human being should have emotions, but should never become emotional. But Arjuna, in spite of his intelligence, in spite of his skill, in spite of his, experience, he still succumbed to his emotions and he failed. Similarly, a lot of us with all our intelligence, skill, experience, we would sometimes become very emotional and we succumb. Most of the companies where I lecture, some of them, especially they call me personally and say, it becomes very difficult, to give pink slip to some people. What to do? How to do this? It's terrible feeling. I'm not saying give pink slip to everybody, but if sometimes you have to do it, you have to do it. But the problem is we become emotional. We mix up emotions. So there are three types of attitudes. One is Mitru Bhav, other is Shatru Bhav, other is Sakshi Bhav. What Gita is teaching us is don't be friendly. Friendly means attached situation. Shatru means enemy. Neither this side nor that side. What do you have to do? Sakshi Bhav. So I, as a manager or a leader of this organization, all my decisions has to be taken in the interest of my organization, even though my personal inclination may be something else. As a leader, you got to do this. Mark Taylor, when he was the captain of Australian team, I think he came to 330 or so. And I'm not sure what was Bradman's record. I think 333 or so is Bradman's record. He was the captain. He could have easily gone ahead and not declared. He could have gone beyond Bradman and he would have been number one then. Later on, of course, the record was also broken. But he could have played. And if he had done that, maybe they would have lost a lot more time and they would have not won the match. So he declared. So leaders should go beyond personal interest. Neither Mitru Bhav nor Shatru Bhav should have Sakshi Bhav. But Arjuna succumbed to Mitru Bhav. His emotions took over and he said, I will not fight, and he sat down. This is the gist of the first chapter. These are the lessons we learn in this chapter, and this is the introduction of the Gita. So the rest of it, we will see from next week. So now, if you have any questions, please ask.
Thank you so much. That was a great session. If anyone has any questions, the chat lines are on. Sandeep, you can unmute everyone in case somebody wants to ask a question.
Yeah, hi, this is Sumant. Quick question. You talked about right at the end Sakshi Bhav as being the one that we should all aspire for. Can you just explain a little bit more about what that Sakshi Bhav exactly is?
Sakshi means witness. Neither attaching to this side or that side. Being a witness, being in the middle, seeing from the organization point of view. See, if the father is the chairman and son is the managing director, when they go in the same car, they are father and son. But once they enter the compound, they are managing director and chairman. Once inside, no son, no father, no nothing. It is thereafter chairman and managing director. You could be thickest friends. But once you are on the field, you are captain or whatever it is. You got to play that role. That is called Sakshi Bhav. That's called witness Bhav.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
अनम्यूट करना है आपको? So anyone, you are unmuted, so feel free to ask the question.
Good afternoon, Vishwanath here
Yes,
from
Vishnu.
Bangalore.
Yeah.
May I request you to please explain about attachments in corporate perspective?
Yeah. I'll talk about it in some of the sessions which is coming up. It's the biggest topic, love versus attachment. In my other Gita lectures, I'll talk about it. We are going to have minimum another 9 sessions. If required, I'll do a little more. Depends on my time and your time and everything. So there definitely we'll be talking about attachment, how attachment comes, how you fall, how to develop intellect. That's going to be our talk for the next 9 weeks. So I'll definitely talk about it in detail.
Hello.
That's the whole Gita.
Hello, sir. This is Gagan Chaudhary.
Yeah.
So I wanted to understand that the Sakshi Bhav that you have mentioned now, and also the Vipassana school of thought, which is a part of Buddhism, are they related? And if yes, how, sir?
See, Vipassana talks about meditation, achieving that witnessing ability through meditation, right? So end of the day, being a witness, that is what it is. In that sense, it's the same. But the method they do it is through meditation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So you are more focused on karma yoga here or gnana yoga?
Both.
Thanks.
Initial 3rd chapter of the Gita is Karma Yoga, but Bhagavad Gita also talks about Gyan. That's what I told you, no? Bhagavad Gita has both Veda Purva and Veda Anta. It has both. दोनों है उसमें. But ज़्यादा कर्म योगा है क्योंकि Arjuna is a man of action. And most of you are men of action, you know. So men and women of action here, so they would like to know more about success and all that. So that's what I said. Bhagavad Gita is more for us. It's more practical Vedanta, but it also talks about Gyan.
Swamiji,
Yes.
Swamiji, I am Rajendran from Chennai.
Yeah.
I just wanted to understand, are you going to address something related to team and team building and going towards success by the team building?
Yes, we will touch upon it through the Gita. Of course, we will talk about success, team, and all that. But I'm not going to be talking for 45 minutes on team building alone. That's a separate thing. That maybe later on, whenever your company is ready, we can do that. But of course, I'll be touching upon team building and success and everything. Yes.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Kaushik.
Yes.
Yeah. So the team bhav that you said, Sakshi bhav, Mitra bhav, and so out of this three bhav, how does the vicious circle play into role? Is it that all the three bhavs are inclusive, or it's only says about the Sakshi bhav where we have this vicious circle? Thanks.
Sakshi Bhav will not give you vicious cycle. Sakshi Bhav will take you in a virtuous cycle. See,
Virtual cycle. Okay.
virtuous cycle, in the sense, positive cycle. Vicious cycle means you collapse, go on deteriorating. See, this Mitra and Shatru, they are actually one only. They look two. Basically, they are attachment. Attachment in favor, attachment in against. That's all. I like someone, I don't like someone. You know, he is my son, so I like him more. He is not my son, I don't like him more. So I hate him. I like him more because he's my son. It's my team. He's my
that
team.
is also Sakshi bhav, na?
That is not Sakshi Bhav. Sakshi Bhav is, he may be my son, but in the interest of the company, I see the other person has more potential, so I promote him more. That is called Sakshi Bhav.
Okay. Okay.
Sakshi
Thank you
Bhav
so much.
means remaining in the middle and seeing what is the good thing for the organization.
Got it. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah.
Sir, is Sakshi bhav is equivalent to Satvika Guna?
Yeah. The more Sattvic you become, you will be Sakshi. Yes.
So Gita also covers the Bhakti Yoga.
Of course, 12th chapter is Bhakti Yoga.
Swamiji, this is Vaishali Sinha. This is very enlightening conversation. I had a question.
Yes.
So, we talked about the pink slip part of it, and in the interest of the organization, you do different things. So, aren't you being selfish by looking out for the interest of the organization? And that is the sort of dilemma we often face, like in business, like selflessness, etc. Kind of sometimes on the face of it seem to be contradicting, So in the interest of the organization, you're being selfish and you're releasing somebody from a job they have. I mean, I'm just saying don't you think we as CEOs or senior managers are being selfish?
Shall I ask you a question?
Sure.
Who killed Ravana?
I don't know. I think Ram.
Selfishness.
Sorry. Selfishness. Okay.
Ravana killed himself by his own action. Lord Ram is not a serial killer going on looking for people to kill. Ravana did actions because of which he had to be eliminated. So when people are working for the organization, you have given them proper training. If you have, I'm assuming, if you have given training, you have given them opportunities, you have told them, listen, if you want anything more, tell us what we can do for you and all that. And if still a person is not bucking up, a person is not leaving his egoistic way of functioning and all that, obviously it's like a cancer cell in the body. If the gangrene forms in the diabetic patient in the leg, the doctor will say to save the entire life, cut the leg out in the interest of the total body. So similarly, in the interest of the organization, if there are certain cancer cells, you got to eliminate them. How is it selfish? That is not selfish. If you are running your organization in a selfish way, that is a different thing. You may be only profit mentality, you do not have the mentality of contribution, then it's a different thing. But when it comes to an organization, the organization itself should be run in the interest of the country. For example, your Renew Power, how best we can give the renewable power to the country, And of course, in that, when you contribute, you also need to survive. You means the entire population which is working in this organization needs to survive and need to eat so that you can contribute. Effort, training, everything, and if still some people are not, and warnings and
Sir, we are losing you. We're not able to hear you.
you got
Swamiji, we're not able to hear you.
Maybe again network glitch at Swamiji's end.
So Ravi, perhaps we should just end the session. Maybe.
Yeah. In any case, it's 12 o'clock.
Yeah.
So
message Swamiji directly. I'll
Yeah.
just call him and let him know that.
Yeah.
I'm not
No,
able
I'll
to-
send him a message saying that.
Okay.
Thanks for
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Very
Thank
good,
you, everybody.
thanks.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Bye, Vishnu. Bye. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.